Hey, are you on TikTok? Before we get into this week's episode, I want to invite you to come and follow me on TikTok. I'm putting out content there every single day and you're going to love it. So come follow me at Wes Hone. All right, let's get into this week's episode.
It was a great story. I was in New York and I walked into the fashion editor's office at Esquire magazine and he goes, James, I'd never even heard of your brand, but we were shooting Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio and whoever else was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And Leonardo said, oh, if we're shooting denim, I'd like it to be Outland Denim. So they had to look us up and get Outland Denim in. You know, like that's a great branding exercise that happened organically. It only happened organically because we're authentic in everything we do to the reason we exist.
Well, hey guys, and welcome back to the podcast. This week, my guest is doing business that literally changes culture. He embodies everything that is kingdom business. He's picked a tough industry. He's definitely picked a tough outcome. But on the journey, he's obviously developed how to be tough and he's out there doing great business. And so it's going to be really inspiring. And I'm going to take a lot of what he's done and make it relevant to you and your business. So James, so welcome to the Kingdom Business Podcast. We appreciate you giving up your time. Can you tell us who is James Bartle?
Well, thanks, Wes. I'm stoked to be able to be on this. Love the work that you guys do. And who's James Bartle? Well, a pretty flawed dude that's having a go ultimately. Inexperienced in lots of what I'm doing, but just confident that it's possible to create, positive outcomes through business. So I'm a guy that's just willing to have a go.
That's cool. Well, I guess that's all God ever wants, right? Like my Bible is full of people that came from a similar position, just somebody willing, somebody able, somebody that wants to give it a crack, which is, I guess it's just perfect. You and Liam Neeson have an interesting connection. Can you take us back to what happened there?
Well, yeah, it's probably not as exciting as you just made it sound, but look, I went to the movies one night with my wife and some friends, and we watched the movie Taken, Liam Neeson film. He's the star of the film, and it is a fictional film. And he's in the storyline, his daughter and her friend are abducted while traveling through Europe and sold into the sex industry. Now, at the end of the film, it had some script that came up and said that these events really happen around the world, and so I was just completely shocked. I was so naive to the realities of human trafficking and how big a industry that was. And I just remember leaving that night just feeling so angry, thinking, right, I'm going to start some kind of vigilante that's going to go out there and eradicate these bad people from the planet. It's those moments, I guess, that you have a choice whether, you've been moved to do something. But a few years later, it took a few years of that before I actually made any moves.
So take just that, I guess that week or two after that, like, was it something you thought of a lot? Did it arrest your heart? Did it keep you awake? Like, how much did that burn inside of you?
Yeah, it did. It really did. It wasn't like I was thinking about it all the time, but it was something that would consistently come to me, and I actually just would feel rage and anger. That's what I would feel every time I'd think of it. Is, man, these people have to be taken off, out of play, so to speak. And how do we do that? That's literally what I was thinking. And there's got to be a way. Maybe we get SAS guys, ex-SAS, to go and find them and get rid of them. That's the sort of thought process that I was following. But over time, my wife's the brains of our family, and she just educated me more over the next few years as to the reality of human trafficking and what it really looked like, and why it exists. And man, as you learn about it, you start to actually have compassion for those that are the perpetrators, because you realize that many of them have been the victims themselves, and it's just such a terrible, vicious cycle. And to really solve issues like that, it really is going to take something drastic. It's not going to be about getting rid of the ones doing the bad.
Mm. I guess, like the first thought processes was SAS soldiers go in and get them, right? It became Outland Denim, which we'll talk about in a second. If you think about those two options, though, if you went down the SAS route, you're fixing one person at a time.
Yeah.
You're not fixing the issue, right? You're literally taking one girl out of slavery, and which is really beneficial. But actually what you've done is systemic change that won't just change one person's life, but it'll re-educate an entire community, an entire vibe. And it actually turns it off at the tap instead of just mopping up the water.
Absolutely.
Which makes it insanely strategic in the way that you decided to approach this. So take us to the start. Take us, what is the business and what are you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it was actually after watching that movie, and a few years later, I had the opportunity to travel with a rescue agency to see the issue firsthand. And it was on that trip that my heart was really changed. We landed in Thailand. We went out to a place that they said was the sex capital of the world. And as we walked down the red lights and all the hustle and bustle going on, it felt heavy, but it didn't seem like what I expected. You know, people looked happy, and it was just this facade that was on at the front. And I remember saying to the guy who was the Australian director of this NGO at the time, it doesn't seem as bad as what you made out it to be, you know. And he said, "Oh, James, I'll take you further." And he took me further out of the main touristy spot. And I'll never forget just looking ahead and seeing this lineup of young women for sale. And when I say for sale, I mean for an hour or for the night or whatever it was. But one of them stood out, and she looked really scared and intimidated to be there. And she looked like she was only 12 or 13. She was very young. And I just remember looking at her and thinking, my gosh, like, what is going on? I asked him, and he said, yes, she looks like she's really young, and it looks like it could be her first night. She just doesn't know what to do, and she looks scared. And, you know, that is the moment where you think, right, this is my Neeson moment. I'm going to run in there. I'm going to kick the door down and throw over my shoulder, run away and save the day. And as I spoke to the director about what was the next move, what do we do? He said, James, if you look around, these little girls are everywhere. And man, my heart broke. You know, I had two nieces of my own at the time, and I just remember wondering where her dad was, or where's her uncle, looking for her. You know, and so it was in that moment that I committed. I didn't know how or what, but I just knew I was willing to commit to being a part of the solution. Now, your mind naturally goes to being a rescuer. But like you said, like, that's an insanely important part of the process, but it's a part of the process. And what I kept hearing from NGOs on that trip was that, you know, we can rescue as many of these young ladies as we like, but unless there is sustainable employment, unless there's a pathway out into the future, they can end up back in the same or worse situation. And so I knew it had to be an economic solution to such a big problem. And that set us on the path of setting up a manufacturing facility that creates the products that we now sell today. And, you know, that's denim is the product we chose. And, you know, at the time didn't realize that denim was such a challenging and competitive space to be in, especially when you're talking about cracking an international market, which is ultimately what we need to do. If we want to achieve these impacts that we dream and believe we're being put here to do, it can't be just based in Australia. And so the naivety was, I guess, an advantage to us. But today we employ over 100 Cambodian women, and we manufacture our own products, and we're manufacturing for other brands now as well.
It's such a cool story, right? And it's obviously compelling for you. Like, it's obviously captured your heart enough to give your life up for it.
Yeah.
You know, you said it needs an economic solution. If you had run in there, kicked the door down, grabbed that girl over your shoulder, you wouldn't have fixed the issue.
No.
Because she needs work to get paid. Now, that's horrific work. Yeah. But actually, you could have potentially produced a worse outcome for her. Absolutely. In that model. So by going down the avenue of producing jobs and giving people enterprise to work in, you actually fix two issues at one time, you know, which makes it a sustainable outcome. And I'm picking up on this point because that's kingdom thinking, right? I think there's a lot of needs in the world, and we tend to approach them like bottom-up change, which doesn't fix them sustainably. And fixing one problem can quite often create another, especially for people that are in disadvantaged situations. And so what you've been able to do is give them security and safety and dignity, but also income and food and shelter and those sort of things, which is phenomenal. You know, one of the topics that we talk about a lot is this concept of assignment, right? And it's just a word, but it's effectively this concept that the Lord wants us to do something with our life while we're here. And it's not generic Christianity of go to church and be nice to people. That should just be like breathing, right? This is something that we are divinely gifted and talented and anointed to go and do. And it's interesting for me picking up on your story because you had the assignment before you had the business, which makes it incredibly compelling. The thing that I'm up against all the time is I meet business people who are somewhat financial and they don't have the assignment, and there's less need to find the assignment, and they struggle with the assignment because they really can lean on their own, self-sufficiency because they've built a business. And whereas for you, I could imagine there would have been some horribly dark days over the time that you've built Outland Denim. But once you know what the assignment is, or you're compelling why, like you do, you can't quit.
Yeah.
you might get up tomorrow and have like 6 bits of bad news, and you're going to think about the 101st girl that is not going to get a job if you quit, or the 100 that are going to lose.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're going to suck it up and you're going to take another step.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolute. Like it's such a. It not only does it move the needle on the kingdom, but it's a valuable tool for the journey.
Yeah.
If I look at my story, I get angry when I see Christian entrepreneurs who don't advance the kingdom. They just treat business for themselves. That's what makes me enraged is those sort of things. Yeah. And when I see Christians in business that play small, or when I see them get taken out by the enemy and things like that.
Yeah.
And so that's the compelling. Like for me, it's the same thing. When I can't be bothered, I have to be bothered because it's a big enough assignment to do it. And I'm picking up on the point because I think everybody needs it.
Yeah.
I think everybody needs to have that really compelling assignment that the Lord tells them and shows them what they've got to do. And as business people, our assignments have massive impact. Yeah. Because everything relies on commerce. Yeah. That's a little soapbox moment from me, but so if we just go outside of Outland Denim for a minute, what role do you think business plays in advancing the kingdom of God?
Well, look, I guess I've probably got quite a, provocative, probably thought process or idea on this. But, I think that actually that the Bible is really clear that he called the church. So when I say the church, I mean the believers, to take care of all of the social issues that are faced in community. And I believe that there's a multitude of ways that he's given us instruction to do that. But the statistics are really clear. We're not willing as a whole. And so I don't say that to try and be patronizing to all of those that are out there working their backsides off to advance the kingdom. But I do say that as that is fact. And so I believe that we're in a very unique time in history where I do believe that there is an anointing on business to really step up, because this is God's heart. God's heart is to love on humanity. And we have the choice to do it. But I think the fear of going without, or sacrifice, or what people think, or all these different fears that we all have in different ways, is preventing us from actually stepping out and acting. Security is the biggest. I need to own my home. I need to A, B, C, D, E, because that's what the culture within Australia has taught me. And therefore it's godly and wise, and some of those things absolutely are. But when they come as the number one, and that's where the security is placed, it actually takes away our ability to be able to step out and have these incredible impacts where you see people's lives completely changed. I would love to see that, business really steps up in this time, and it becomes a shining light to the body of Christ, to, for businesses to be able to demonstrate that this is possible. We're using the power of our business. Now, imagine if everybody used the power of their family finances, not even just their finances, their time, they're just them being, the world would change. And, I'm so passionate about that happening. But it's got to be, there's got to be people that are going to step out and take the risk. And I think that, business is in a great space right now to be going. I think God's anointing is on businesses to really take the lead.
Oh, hey, I hope you're enjoying this week's episode. Listen, I'm just here training a group here in this room, but I need you to subscribe to my channel. Guys, do you think they should subscribe to the channel? Yeah! Guys, please subscribe.
I mean, you basically just raised the bar, right, for everybody, which was probably your intention, and it's an amazing thing to do. Because there's a lot, I mean, if you look at modern day philanthropy, right, you know, it's touted as a great idea, and it is, it's a very cool thing, it's a valuable part. But if you look at it, it's like, it's at the end of the journey, right? So it's 30 years of making loads of money and then spending the next, whatever, 20, giving most of it away. But you mentioned security. For the believer, we never want to get security from our own wealth, right? Because it could go in tomorrow. So our security is from the Lord, which now means that we don't have to wait to do good works. And that's common thinking in society today, right? Is you kind of do those good works after you've made it.
Yes.
Absolutely. And you're not doing that. I certainly didn't do that. I found reasons to show my allegiance to the Lord on the journey, which actually brings a very interesting dynamic. And that is that you need the supernatural favor of heaven to make this work then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Because you've completely switched the world system, right? Of like, I'll do it in my own strength and then I'll give it all away. You're like, no, I'm going to give it away from the beginning, right? I'm going to make investments that don't make economic sense from the beginning, which means that actually the Lord has to step in and grow my business, right? So have you got a couple of stories where you have seen the supernatural of God, right? And I know that there's a Meghan Markle story, which is probably not as cool today as it was back when it happened.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a DiCaprio story, and that's probably not as cool today as it was. But have you got a couple of stories where you have seen by choosing your allegiance to the kingdom of God first, seeing God add some super onto your natural?
Oh, mate, I couldn't. I can tell you a number of stories, but you know, I 100% do believe in that. It is the stepping out and God's provision. And when you actively rely on Him to provide and you step out into things that you're not even sure about. You know, I think one of the things that stops us from stepping into, should I do something or not? I feel I should, but I'm not sure if God's called me to. I think that's a big misleading idea that the Christian church has and talks about regularly, is when you're called to ministry or you're called, it's rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. You are called. I can tell you, if you believe in Jesus as the Son of God, you are called. There is no question. Go and just read the red writing in the Bible for starters, you know, and that will tell you that you are called. And I think one of the things that steps out to me always is that when, you know, Jesus is talking about when you love on these kinds of people, when you love on the poor, the widows, the children, it's like doing it to Him. And if you actually stop and think about that, think what an incredible privilege to actually be able to serve God in that way. It makes it very tangible in your mind as to what I'm trying to do. And the other thing is, when I started on this journey, I didn't have neon lights and lightning bolt coming from the sky and throwing out fleeces. God, is this the right thing, not the right thing? I just knew, because I knew what the Bible said, that this is the right thing to care for these people. So when I say called, I just knew, not because of anything miraculous, but the miraculous moments on the journey have been absolute confirmations of God's hand on this. I'm not a very smart guy. I went to grade 9. And I'm not saying that in any way of like, I don't think that I'm capable, because I do. But I'm not educated. And I've had to learn as I've gone, and I've made many mistakes along the way. In trying to achieve what we're now starting to see. But it has been because of that weakness that I think I've had to rely on God. So it's made it easier for me than it has for other people who have the natural ability or have all the knowledge. So I guess I can't necessarily take glory for that. I just didn't have it, so I had to rely. So it was easier for me. But the moments of seeing God's hand and take something from nothing to, you know, to something miraculous has been moments where, like, I mean, one amazing one was we were broke, and we've been broke so many times on this journey, just, you know, like it's a regular thing, and especially COVID, like it's been what you said at the beginning of, we can't quit. That has been the secret sauce. So I need $1 million tomorrow, and the consequence of not is insanely high. And it's literally tomorrow, and we, you know, I got my key shareholders together. I told them the scenario, and we had an offer on the table where it could get us out of it, but it wasn't the right offer. And I just said, look, we can take this offer, which was substantial, or we can continue on in the way I think we should go, but it means we've got 2 weeks of cash flow and we're done. And there was 7 shareholders around that table, and they all said, let's run the gauntlet. We ran the gauntlet, and the next day I get a phone call going, yeah, I'm going to transfer $1 million across and invest in someone I've been talking to for a long time. That's one moment. So down to the absolute wire. Another moment, yes, the Meghan Markle thing. It's organically, she got our jeans, and she, she liked them. She liked the story. She wears them in, here in her tour in Australia, and it just blew up the brand from a sales a little bit, but from exposure. It meant that I could call most places and walk in the door. So in this denim space, that's difficult because it's so competitive, and there's such great brands, and our quality of our product wasn't there at the time, and but the quality of our story was so good that it was getting us across the line. And man, I could go on and tell you story after story, but I'm so grateful for the moments of not having any finances. I'm so grateful for being broke. I'm so grateful for like even legal issues as they pop up over IP, or legal issues over the way you're trading in a country and not even knowing how to trade in a country, and just all of these things that feel like, oh my gosh, and the anxiety sets in. They are the moments that make you just like fall back on the thing that you actually have trust in, which is the creator. And so I just feel like I'm just really, really lucky that I know him. And even if it all fails, that's okay.
Yeah,
it's still okay. Yeah. And I think that's my mindset. Although I'll do everything I can not to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to go back to. I mean, I love the story because you chose pure faith, right? And you weren't waiting for 7 prophetic words to line up with you need to start a jeans ministry, right? There's a lot of people that are trying to line their ducks up, and I don't know if you've ever lining up ducks is just a bad idea anyway. But you just decided to apply the faith, and you've seen the Lord step in, and so. I think it's interesting. One of the topics that gets taught a lot in church, modern day church, is like, find out what the Lord's doing and do that. And I'm like, yeah, that's okay. But I have found that as I've activated my faith, he's often got involved in what I'm doing too, right? Because if you do it, like find out what the Lord's doing and do that, it puts a lot of pressure on you to have to figure out one small thing, right? It's like, whereas I think he's already put it in us. And we just got to get started, right? When I think about YWAM was one dude and a guitar. Yeah. Right. And now it's the largest ministry in the world. And, over 60 years or something, it's been built. Like they didn't overthink it. They just heard the Lord and just moved. Right. Yeah,
so, Wes, can I just add in there, like I had these things confirmed, not just by God's hand, but even from prophetic. So I was given a prophetic word. I actually think before I'd actually made a commitment to the Lord. And I remember it was my dad, my mum and dad wanted me to see these beautiful old couple who had this prophetic ministry, and I was probably a bit skeptical of it all. But anyway, he gave me this word, and all I could remember was, you're going to have and he called it a ministry, but you're going to have a ministry, and all I can see is strings. I have no idea what that means. Anyway, left me. I'm in Turkey one day at our denim mill, and I look across the room and I see all of the cotton coming out, being woven into the fabric, and I see these strings just going out in lines, and it just smoked me. All these years later, had never connected it, but it was like what you said there is I really do believe God puts it in you, but unless you act, you never get to see it happen. It does take that step of faith and just acting and being okay with knowing that God is okay with you stepping out in belief, even if you're wrong, even if he didn't want you to. He is okay with it because he loves you, and he's actually proud of you for taking that step. And the more we do that, the better we get at hearing him and knowing whether we're taking the right step or not. But I think, unfortunately, for myself included, and a lot of the time, it's just the fear of actually stepping out that's so difficult.
Mm. Now, I'm being a bit sarcastic here, but I'm surprised that you didn't call them Jesus jeans. And I had a look on the website yesterday, and I couldn't find a fish logo anywhere. So how does a man with such great faith come up with a brand that doesn't glorify Jesus?
Yeah, totally. I love it. I years ago I used to think about you have I've got a Christian business, or I've got a Christian brand or label, and it's like, what? You have a Christian? Really? I actually didn't know Jesus came to save businesses or labels or clothes. Now he uses all those things, absolutely, and it was a big mind shift for me actually after 10 years of having a faith or so to where we launched Outland Denim, and I went, man, the glorifying Jesus is in loving people. Even on an evangelical sense, and I've spent 10 years as an evangelist. I really believe that the lack of action, the lack of loving, the lack of practical love for people is one of the things that prevents us from seeing incredible works of the Holy Spirit. We chase the vibe, so to speak, versus act and love and do the things the Bible instructs us to do. And when we do those things, we start to see the miraculous moments happening. But it's that action first. So look, that's my foundational belief of just love people. I don't care who you are, what you believe. Hey, most of the people that work for us are Buddhists. That's what they believe in Cambodia. And I want them to know Jesus 100%. But my approach to that is, even if you don't, I will still love you. We will still care for you. And I think that makes it a very genuine love when you can get to that place. In my earlier years, it would have been about numbers. How many people said the prayer that I could come back to church on Sunday and tell everybody, because that gets checks written. We can go to the next one and do it because I'll have diesel to do it. It's those kinds of things that I think that have really shifted for me and going, no, I just want to genuinely love people and demonstrate the love of Christ to them.
I mean, the Good Samaritan in the story he didn't preach. And actually the religious leaders walked past the person in the street with need. And of all people, it was the least, the Samaritan, who probably shouldn't have been doing anything good, is the one that says, I'll fund it, I'll pay for you, take care of them. And if there's another bill, send it to me type thing. Like it was just an act of, a beautiful act of the heart of God. And,
absolutely.
And it's not about numbers, but ironically, you love on people long enough and in their mess, they will want to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. At some point in their mess, they're going to inquire of the Lord or inquire of you. Like, why would you bother?
Whereas it reminds me of the story. I was, what we would call the greatest fall from grace that I've ever had personally. I rang this man, Christian guy who's become a very trusted friend. And I told him what I'd done. And his reaction to me was laughter. And it wasn't ever laughter in, I condone what you've done. It was laughter in, wow, this is a big one we're going to need to deal with. I'm with you. And the lack of judgment in it gave me security to be completely vulnerable to him over a period of years, for him to help me deal with and work through the issues that I'd faced. And it was the probably greatest example I've ever had of a really, really solid, what would you call it? Accountability partner in love, not in like an iron fist kind of a deal. And it was just, it changed me. It completely changed me. And so I think that there's a lot to be learned from the Good Samaritan and the way that we deal with people and the judgment that needs to be taken away because we don't really understand. And when we do those things, I really do think it takes the lid off the top for the Holy Spirit to really, really be saying.
How did that then help you? How did that shape you to then take on these girls and not judge them? Like how have you taken that and made it your own? And because that's what you're doing today.
Yeah, man, it was vital actually, because it was the first time I ever understood the grace of God, because previously I actually thought I was good enough because I was actually working my backside off to serve him. I was sacrificing, I was doing all the things, ticking the boxes, going to church, doing my quiet time, doing all the stuff, and then I could still be so crappy. How? It demonstrated the grace of God to me. And this guy, he really demonstrated grace to me. And it showed me just how vulnerable to sin I am, and vulnerable to falling short of where I personally want to be myself. And it made me go, I don't stand on, mate, I don't stand on any pedestal because I'm as average as I'm worse than average, and I am, because I know my heart and I know the things I think and the things I want and all the unhealthy things that over time are being refined in me. So it's just taken away. I'm not saying I'm not judgmental still, because I still have an issue with judgment. But it has really highlighted that I got no grounds to be judgmental to anybody, because I'm as bad as they get.
And that right there is the reason why I love doing this podcast and connecting with people like you, James, because your humility is so attractive, right? Like you've got a global brand, and yet you can just sit there and be fully aware that you don't have it together. And there'd be people that are watching this going, yeah, that's me. And I've maybe kept a facade up to try and make it look like I've got it all together, but I'm struggling with my facade. And having you being that honest and vulnerable and being able to say that, like, it's such a beautiful trait for you to be able to sit here and say that to, possibly 20,000 strangers that will never, that may not know you. So thank you for being you and all that journey. It's a beautiful part of it. The brand, let's go to the brand, right? Because I'm a business guy at heart. Outland Denim is just two words, and they probably mean a lot to you. I'm up against it with people to understand the power of brand. I don't know how many jeans brands there are or clothing brands there are in the world. You picked an insanely saturated industry, so which means that brand is everything, right? Because how do I choose between the 1,000 different types of jeans that exist, right? It's brand. Which means you had to be way intentional about building a brand, because otherwise it was just jeans, right? Yep. The biggest mistake most Christian t-shirt brands make is they don't have a brand. They have t-shirts and a slogan, but there's a million different t-shirts, right? And I don't need Fire and Flames up mine, to be totally honest, right? So how have you intentionally built your brand? What did you do to make the brand go global?
Well, the funny thing is, I think that it is a very difficult thing to build a brand. And actually, in the beginning, I think about all the elements that go into branding, and, they seem like they're not that important. But when you think about, I need to identify who my brand is as a human, who wears my brand and what does it stand for and all those things, it starts to make it a little bit more real. And you think it helps you. But building the brand for us was, I guess, an add-on. We started because of cause, and cause was everything. And that created a massive challenge for us to create a brand that was aspirational. But the story of Robin Hood is something that really inspires me. And the reason it inspires me is because I am frustrated that it's very difficult to get money to flow into the areas of need. And I look at Robin Hood as an example, as a story of a way of doing that, taking from the rich to give to the poor. And now I don't think there's anything wrong with people being rich, but I look at what he's done. And so when I think about that, I go, wow, if I want to do that using a brand, I've got to have a brand that people want because of the brand. I need to be able to somehow get them to part with their money because they love this brand, they love this product, and that money can then be used to have all of these impacts. And so then brand becomes very important, because how is it going to become something that is aspirational enough that they want to align their personal identity with this brand, And I think we're coming into a time now where, we didn't plan 11 years ago when we started on this journey that things would shift with the social conscious of consumers to be thinking about, is it ethical or is it sustainable, so to speak? We just did it because we believed it was right. And that has played into our branding. We are a brand, our slogan is good for humanity. And, it means so much to us that Outland Denim is good for humanity. And it's good for humanity because of lots of things. And as we start to build those elements out in our branding, so through social media and the content that we create, the things that we participate in, the people that wear our products, that starts to build this brand that will align with some and not with others. And that was an important thing to distinguish, is that we're not for everybody. And, that was one of the big mistakes we made, is we wanted to be everything to everybody. And it meant that we weren't potent. And I would say only in the last 12 months have we really started to tighten up on our branding and who we are and who are we marketing it to and who do we want to wear our product. and you can see it's paying dividends. So branding is in fact, I would say branding and product are the two most important things in a business. And if you can't get those things right, so your service or your product and your branding, it's going to be very difficult for you to achieve, probably, if you've got very ambitious goals for your business. And we're a living example of that.
Yeah, or a good brand should attract and repel, right?
Yeah.
Because then you can speak really clearly to the people that you want to attract.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people can't handle that because they're trying to gather it all up, right? And they I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want everybody. Everybody's nobody, right? So can we drill down a little bit on what you're doing? What is on a daily basis, what sort of investments are you making into brand and where? I kind of want to look at, what are you doing across socials? Are you an early adopter for like TikTok? Are you investing heavily? Do you have in-house branding? Are you global? Give us some actual tactics on what are you doing to take the brand global on a daily basis and across what platforms?
Well, yeah. So look, we're not early adopters of TikTok. We do have a TikTok account that we don't use. We've got an Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, and we're doing daily posts on Instagram primarily. We see that as probably, I guess, a glimpse into, people use Instagram today as a tool to go, I don't go to a website straight away now. I go straight to Instagram if I want to look at a business. And so we go, okay, we want them to go and with a glimpse get a look at our product and a bit of a vibe about what the brand sort of is. That's as much as that is. It's not so much about engagement for us anymore on Instagram. It's more so a lookbook. Come and see what we do. We get the views, but we're not really trying to get you engaged, because the amount of effort that goes into getting engagement there is in my opinion, a waste of resource today. For a brand like ours, at least. A brand like ours needs to be very intentional about the connections that we make. So whether that's, I don't like the word influencer, but it's like influencer strategies. So I prefer to think of them as like just part of our community, people who genuinely believe in the same things we believe in, and they don't have to believe in everything we believe in. It's just they align with certain parts of our business and they love our products and they take it out to the world. A lot of that for us happens organically. And so, that was, like I said, with Meghan Markle. Leonardo DiCaprio was another one. It was a great story. I was in New York and I walked into the fashion editor's office at Esquire magazine. And he goes, James, I'd never even heard of your brand, but we were shooting Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio, and whoever else was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood movie. And Leonardo said, if we're shooting denim, I'd like it to be Outland Denim. So they had to look us up and get Outland Denim in, like miraculous moments like that. Now that's a great branding exercise because we think Leonardo, he's a bit of a cool guy. He's a bit of an old school guy. He cares about lots of environmental issues. We care about them too. That's a great branding exercise that happened organically. It only happened organically because we're authentic in everything we do to the reason we exist. And when you get to branding, there's a lot of shiny lights all around you, all over the place. And when we think about marketing our brand, we want to participate in everything. But I think if you keep it really potent and targeted, always about what you're about, people know you for it. And that's the example of someone like Leonardo DiCaprio not getting paid. We didn't have a PR agency go after him. He just volunteered because he saw the brand stands and aligns with something he stands and aligns for. So that brings you to values. And I go, the most powerful branding attributes that you can have is to be values aligned in everything you do. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve through our branding. So we have in-house branding. So we've got marketing, graphic design, and sales in-house. And that's there's good and bad to that. The bad is that being in-house, it's a cash flow thing. It's hard to manage. Sometimes you get pigeonholed a little bit in the way you think and the way you act. Whereas sometimes when you're out with a branding agency or marketing agency that's external, you're bringing new ideas in that's a little more creative sometimes. So, there's plus and minus on both sides. And I have tried both sides and I'm happy with the current in-house situation outside of having to pay wages every week. But look, I think the amount of time that needs to go into branding in the early stages, I wish I put more effort into it, before I launched the brand, because I think we would have been far more successful, a lot faster. But look, it's like everything in our business, it's just sort of happening as it happens, and we're going as hard and fast as we can, but we're not experts on everything. So
no. And is your business model mostly D2C, or are you direct to consumer, or are you going wholesale distributors? What's your business model split?
Yeah, look, pre-COVID, we were about nearly 80% we were wholesale, and we'd actually just launched into the US. We had 3 weeks on the floor with the likes of Nordstrom. And our sales, were all the other brands that had a bit of a sustainability story. We outsold them, and then COVID hit and shut everything down. So we went from 80% to zero in our wholesale business. So our business was virtually done. I'd just done a capital raise, not done. I just launched a capital raise. And we believed we would be fine because we just shift over to e-commerce, and we did. And over that time, we've built e-commerce, but we're back in wholesale again now. And we're getting close to being a 50-50 split wholesale to direct to consumer. But I think that's an interesting point. I've never really believed in direct to consumer as what I hear everyone talking about. I actually think it's great and it's vital and important. But I believe that bricks and mortar retail, I believe that community and selling to, another store who can make their margin on your product, engage community in the conversation in a more meaningful way, face-to-face, is a really potent marketing tool. And so for us, it's never been about just trying to get the largest margin out of D2C. It has been about using that wholesale experience. But then when you think about going into international markets, we've done both, where we've used a distributor and also managed it ourselves using third-party logistics services. So, there's lots of ways you can do it, and they, again, all have pros and cons. But you can burn a lot of money when logistically you're probably not set up properly, and that's where distributors have played a really important part for us.
Yeah. But I think, just to peel back what you just said, you would restrict your business if you were going for the most margin you could get, because you'd be forced to go D2C, which, by the way, can work. I mean, you can build a phenomenal brand D2C.
Absolutely.
But that's building a brand. If you're trying to change consciousness and start a conversation, then it's about casting the biggest net you can, right?
Absolutely.
And that wouldn't be you wouldn't do one channel if your goal was to cast a big net. So,
but I also think with a brand like ours, where you've got a powerful story, what a really powerful marketing strategy is to use retailers to tell your story day in and day out. Yeah. So I think, it's not all just because of casting a large net. It is because I believe it into being a very potent marketing tool. But for us, our KPI is really, we've piloted something. That's all we've really done. We've gone, is it possible and does it work? And we're going, yes, it does. Business can be used to have these impacts. And look, to be perfectly clear with you, we work to try and hit like a GP of 50 on our product. So it's not like we're got a small profit margin. We're aiming for that. We think they have to go hand in hand. So using our business to go as far and wide, every single unit we sell, we say activates a cycle of freedom. And so that's the power of this brand. So it comes down to units sold, not just margin.
Yeah, but you don't have to have one metric, right? You can have a solid GP and tell a good story and build a brand. You can and your way through those things, right? That's the ultimate.
Yeah.
One of the things I looked up where you sit on the I think it's like the Baptist World Aid thing they do every year, which I've been fascinated with for many years. Actually, I like clothing, and so. That's been quite confronting over the years to look at that and go, I normally shop at this shop, and then seeing that they're shocking for their supply chain type things.
Yeah.
You're A+, which is, I guess, the best. So that's credit to you. You rank as A+ on their thing. Which, if you're going to lead the charge, you should probably be A+. It's interesting for me because, there are certain shops that I go to, and I had to go check them. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. So typically a lot of my clothes would come from, say, R.M. Williams. So you look at them and go, okay, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. And getting better. So they're obviously conscious of their supply chain issues and things like that. I've got a real problem actually with cheap clothing. Before I ever really engaged with your story, I've just gone like, if I go to a shop and there's a shop there and they're selling a $10 t-shirt, I could get my 8-year-old to realize that people are getting ripped off here.
Yeah.
If I'm spending $8 on a t-shirt because the retailer's making $4, right? Yeah. Or whatever, right? So for the other $4, it's got to be landed here, and then it's got to be, made and shipped, and then the factory and the lights and the wages and that. Yeah. I'm like, so this is not enough, right? For these people to get paid well. So, and I actually think it's really interesting because, there's this whole world of like, save and get yourself wealthy. Even within the Christian faith, there are big profiles who are like, live cheap, live on less than you, like live cheap so that you can set yourself up. I'm like, cool. So you set yourself up at the expense of some other of God's children. Like that's a problem, but I don't know that we've ever thought about it, right? No. So that wouldn't be God's model, that you prosper at the expense of a whole bunch of other people. It's never been his model. So I've got a real problem with cheap clothes, and I understand if you really don't have any money, then that's a great place to start buying clothes. But at some point, I think you've got to have that awareness that says there's not enough economics in this for everybody to be okay. Yep. And so and ironically, more expensive clothes usually last longer, right? Usually. And so, the economies of scale are not there anyway. I'll tell you a funny story. When I went on my honeymoon, we went to Singapore, and me and my wife gave each other a little bit of money to spend. And I bought one item, right, that I was still wearing 10 years later. She went to the markets, bought like 400 items, and none of them lasted 2 weeks, right? You pull a thread and the whole thing disappears, right? So what would you say to that as somebody who's on this charge? What would you say about the way we should consider supply chain, and these people that are, living possibly, below the poverty line in exchange for making our clothes?
Well, it's something pretty close to my heart, Wes, and it's actually one of the things that really does frustrate me about the culture we live in within Australia, and in particular the Christian culture, because I think it doesn't align with the way God would want us to live our lives very clearly. I'll tell you a story of one girl that we employed. She was trafficked out of Cambodia as a 14-year-old with her friend. Anyway, her friend dies over the years that they were there. She ended up dying from getting sick. And the reality is that it's just cheaper to replace a slave today than it is to care for one. Eventually, a great organization called IJM, International Justice Mission, found, identified, rescued, repatriated her back into Cambodia, where we employed her. Now, she came to us as a 17-year-old. And she had lived these horrific 3 years where she had seen her friend die on a garment factory floor, because that is the reality of this industry. And the best brands are having these issues happening within their supply chains. Something I'll say to the Baptist World Aid Ethical Fashion Report is, yes, it's been great to be a part of that, but I also spoke out about it last year, and it's not something that we're participating in again as a result of brands that aren't paying living wages. And for me, that's a foundational thing. If you're not going to pay someone enough that they can actually live on, then that's criminal. And it's actually a form of slavery, in my opinion, and many others' opinion. And so some of the best known brands aren't doing that. And so actually in the report last year, you had to dig to find out if a brand, to go back into the report to find out if it was actually paying a living wage. Yet there was brands getting rated as A's that don't even pay a living wage. So I know I raised that with the Baptists, and and along with others that had concern around it as well, some other A+ brands, and as a result, there's a number of us that won't participate again until those things are rectified. So that when you go, Wes, and you look at that report, you go very quickly, whether the brand aligns with your own personal values. Because if it doesn't, then it's just another form of greenwashing. And actually, that's the greatest threat that any good faces, is greenwashing, this manipulative marketing, leading you to believe that you're a part of a solution when in fact you're a part of the problem. It means that brands like us can't prosper, can't thrive to the extent that we could if we had stronger, maybe even regulations, government regulations around that kind of marketing, which there is, but isn't manned very well. So I think that, if we really want to do the right thing, it's really difficult when it comes to clothes and all products because of that exact issue, greenwashing. How do we really know? And do I have the time to research it? And the reality is you shouldn't have to. you shouldn't have to research it. You should be able to go confidently and buy a product. So what I would suggest should happen is that there is foundational things like living wages, that every item, if you can't prove that those that made that product were paid a living wage, then the garment should be marked telling people that this garment doesn't pay. If there were slaves involved, or you can't prove that there wasn't, maybe the garment should be marked saying that this garment was made by slaves, and maybe that would be enough to get us to go, wow, I can't participate in this any longer. And that would be the most powerful moment for fashion and every industry, is when consumers say, I won't buy anymore. Yeah. Brands would shift really quickly. But what it does do is for brands like Kmart, and I mean, you can probably erase that bit, but brands that, start with a H and end with an M, like there is really, it's quite terrible what's happening. And we really do need to shift away from that model.
Isn't that where NFTs are going to play a role? Because surely, one of the things that's going to happen with NFTs is every time you purchase a pair of jeans from a retailer, you're going to be issued an NFT, and it's going to be able to track the entire supply chain and let you know. Now, I'm sure there'll be some lying in amongst all of that, but surely there'll be somebody that kind of enters that game to bring some sort of, because the beauty is the retailer or the provider could say, oh, we're brilliant on an NFT. Yeah. But somebody else is going to be able to track that supply chain and say, actually, they're shocking. And it's going to be far more transparent in the future as to who is paying living wages and who's doing those sort of things. So do you see that as being something valuable that's coming, that's going to expose some greenwashing? Yeah,
look, we've been looking at them for a long time and putting them in our products, and so that people can exactly do that. Look, I don't see it as powerful as it sounds. I mean, blockchain tech is obviously something that's really powerful in connection with an NFT, and then you can see that you can't change the data, but it's only as good as the data that's input. And a lot of the problems that we face in these regions where a lot of our products are made is that there is two sets of books. The auditor is in town. We all know the auditor's in town, so everyone pulls out book number 2, and how do you get around that? My belief is actually that it's going to take different kinds of tech, so using different forms and things that we've piloted as working, and putting them all the way through the supply chain so that there's real-time data, 24/7 monitoring, to actually give us confidence the right thing's been done. And there is a lot of technology that can be adopted into those. And now we've tested it in the cotton fields, and we've also tested in our facilities with 24/7 monitoring of, sensors, energy, like all sorts of things you can monitor, and it does work. I think that's going to be the solution. And then those audits is what consumers are looking at, because it's real time. You can't manipulate it. If it's cotton, a satellite passes every 48 hours and photographs. Okay, people picked it. It wasn't, picked by a machine. Okay, we know we've got to do more due diligence on that particular farm because people picked it. Who are they? More often than not, in Turkey, it'll be Syrian refugees. And my gosh, the issues that we could talk to you about with the things that those poor people have faced at home, fleeing war to go into a place where they're completely exploited. And why are they exploited? Because we're pushing price down all the time. And that is most certainly not God's economy.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. I love the march that you're on. There might be some people that throw mud at you, but it can't stick because all of this comes from a place of wanting to love people, honor them well, give an expression of the kingdom to them. So I'm sure you get a bit of grief as you go, but not from this community. No. Mate, there'd be some people that are early on in their business journey listening to this. They might be on a treadmill, mowing the lawn, driving, whatever. Just in your final words, what would you say to them as a word of encouragement on their kingdom business journey?
You're the solution. You are the solution to the needs that you see around you. Your business is the solution. Your business is so important. It's important to God. It's important to humanity. Every business plays a role in this. And failure is your friend. Don't be scared to fail. I think that fear of failing prevents us from acting. Just be confident enough to go, every time I fail, I get closer to being successful, because no one has ever been successful without lots of failure. So they would be the only words that I would have that would be worth anything, I think.
I love it. I knew I was going to love this one. I knew that when I started poking around, watch your story, but I started digging a bit deeper and prepare some questions. And I was like, this one this one I'm gonna really enjoy. Obviously, I like clothes, you like clothes, so we've got that in common. But you're a wonderful example of a kingdom entrepreneur, right? Somebody who's just doing it, not talking about it or necessarily writing books on how to do it, but doing it. And you're the exact kind of person that I want to put in front of the audience, because it's incredibly inspirational. And it's practical. You're in revenue, and fighting for your business every day like everybody else. So, mate, thank you for your time. I appreciate your heaps, and we'll put up some lower thirds and things like that with your URL so people can find out more. For the guys that are listening and watching, go and check out the website. Get on there, have a look around. I did, and there's some cool products on there that you'll really appreciate. Bless you, James. Have a super week. For the rest of you guys, we'll be back next week for another episode of the Kingdom Business Podcast.